And Lori, your reading was so perfect. So perfect. If you haven't quite caught the theme, we're talking about nature today and God and creation today. And my talk title is Always Connected, because the truth is we are always connected to spirit, especially in nature. So at some point you may have heard me talking about this in like chit-chatty conversation, but when I was younger, I set a goal. I set a goal to be in all 50 states by the time I was 50. 50 by 50. That's what I kept saying to myself. 50 by 50. And my dad was kind of a bit of a wanderlust, right? And so we had this big camping trailer, and we went on these long road trips as a family. And so in 1976, when I was a mere baby, we drove from Colorado, where we lived, up through several states, up over the Great Lakes, into Canada, then down into Boston to do the bicentennial celebration there, which was really super cool. They did like a reenactment of the Tea Party and all that bicentennial stuff, which was fun. But then we left there and we went on this long other circle of states and went down into Kentucky to see my grandmother, his mother, and then we went back on to Colorado. So I think on this great big looping trip, I was in like 15 states. And as I wrote the states down, I was 12, so as I wrote the states down, I thought I might want to get to the rest of them, right? There's only 50, and I was like almost halfway. So to help me with this goal in my life, I manifested some nationally focused career choices, which had me traveling about. When I woke up at 49, I realized, well, heck, I've only got one more. But the problem was, I didn't remember whether on that big looping trip, if we had brushed through North Dakota or South Dakota, and my mom couldn't remember either. So I just went ahead and planned a trip to go to both of them just to be sure. I didn't want to cheat. So if you're interested, I can tell you more about that last whirlwind trip to get that checked off my list. But the point is that about 7 months before I turned 50, I accomplished my goal, 50 by 50. So yeah, that's pretty bad, but nonetheless, I did it. And so all that traveling did for me was I developed a great awareness of the beauty of this very large country that we live in. He's fine, you can ignore him, he's just fine. He's not distracting me at all. We have beautiful new children with us this morning. So you'll find out the children are a big part of my ministry, so I'm glad they're here. But at any rate, I just developed this great awareness of how large our country is and how beautiful it is. And my dad really enjoyed the great outdoors. So he was a camper and a hunter and a hiker and a fisher and all that stuff. And I developed not appreciation for much of that, but I did appreciate being out at the places that he did those activities. So I've seen almost every mountain range in the United States, and I've stood on many, many, many of our beaches in this country and the shorelines, and he was the kind of dad that would come to a screeching halt, throw the car in reverse, back up, and make you go read one of those historical markers. And then you had to get back in the car and tell him what it was, because he wasn't getting out to read it, but we had to get out and read it. Or maybe he would spy. He was an eagle eye because he was a hunter, so he would spy things that we should see, like there was an elk, or there was a beaver, or there was a skunk, or there was something. So I was always being, asked to look at things, and it might have been boring or irritating at the time, but now I can look back and really appreciate his appreciation for the world that we lived in. So wherever I go, I am aware of how everything in nature is similar, but also how different nature presents itself in the different climates that we can get to in this country and the regions. And I can appreciate like the rocky shorelines of New England or even the Pacific Ocean. Those shorelines are very different than our beautiful beaches here in the South. But I just love it all. I love the softer Appalachian kind of mountains that are in North Carolina, where I was this week. But I also enjoy the craggy Rocky Mountains and even the majestic mountains of the Pacific Northwest too. But anyway, over the past 20 years or so, I've deepened my appreciation of God as it shows up in nature. And my experience of travel has really deepened my awareness that God is in all. God is in everything. So now as I stand and I look at a vista of some sort, I can gaze at the magnificence of spirit on display in the natural world. And my soul becomes aware of the spiritual truth and the spiritual power that's evidenced in whatever it is that I am beholding. You learn a lot about the Creator by looking at its creation. You know, that's the truth of art as well. You learn a lot about the artist when you look at the art that they create. And so when I look at the creation of this world, I learn a lot about what does spirit, what does the universe, what does the life of all life value. And it's vast. And one of the things that it obviously values is diversity of expression, because there is so much uniqueness in nature. You know, and one of the questions that I always get asked when I start talking about this 50 by 50 thing is, well, what's your favorite state? What's your favorite state? And that's a hard question, because, you know, different places are beautiful. It really kind of depends on what you're looking for or what you're wanting to experience when you're traveling. But I can share that I do have a few favorites. So I love Hawaii. I love Hawaii, and I love how God shows up in the fragrant flowers and the volcanoes and the rainbows, and the lushness of the Pacific Islands are just gorgeous. And in the opposite extreme, I actually found Alaska to be one of the most beautiful places on the planet. It is so extreme and beautiful. And the water is so pristine, and the wildlife there is just so different than you see anywhere else. But there are special spots all over the country for me. There's certain waterfalls or beautiful canyons or certain meadows or lakes. They just call to me. So the one I want to talk about this morning happens to be in one of the states that I consider home, and that is Colorado. And in southern Colorado, near the ski resort town of Aspen, there's one of the most gorgeous places I have ever seen in my life, and it is called Maroon Bells. Now, I have a photo of Maroon Bells that hangs in my office, in my home office, because I went there when I graduated from ministerial school. The graduation was in Denver, and we went down to Aspen and saw Maroon Bells, because people kept saying, you gotta see Maroon Bells, you gotta see Maroon Bells. Come on in and have a seat. You gotta see Maroon Bells. And so I went, and here are some photographs of this place. So this is Maroon Bells in the winter, and it's just pristine and gorgeous. Okay, so now that's winter. This is spring. So there's a walkway that walks all the way around this lake with benches and things you can sit and look, but that's spring. And then this is Maroon Bells in the summer. And then this is the fall. And I'm going to ask Lori to leave that picture up for a minute, because I want to talk about it. I want to talk about some spiritual truth that's on display in Maroon Bells. So do you see all those yellow trees? Those are aspen trees. Aspen trees have much to teach us about spiritual truth. Mark Nepo is a writer, and he wrote this about aspen trees. An old friend drove me into the forest so we could walk the aspen grove. Walking among them, touching them, listening to their creak and sway, I could feel their connectedness. Above ground, aspen trees grow as individual trees, but below ground they're enlivened by one interconnected set of roots. They are the most expansive growth of trees to share a common root system. This means they are one individual living organism and one living community at the same time. About a mile into the aspen grove, my friend and I sat on a ledge and waited. Once we were quiet, we could feel the entire grove sway as one timeless aspen and as 1,000 individual trees on the mountainside. We could almost hear them breathe in unison. I felt certain that in the paradox of the aspen trees waits the secret to our interdependence, being who we are and staying connected to everyone. As we walked back to the car, my old friend said, there's a community already existing underground that's growing us into being. Mark Nepo. So aspen trees are a physical representation of the spiritual truth of us being an individualized expression of God, yet at the deepest level, the truth of oneness is present in its symbol. See, underneath everything going on in our individual lives, there's a community and a source growing us, supporting us, feeding us, and blessing us. It's just the truth of it. And out of that source, we rise into life. We do our individual thing, right? You know, just as an aspen tree shimmers in a breeze, we kind of shimmer in our own existence. The roots of our very being draw up the energy of life, the energy of God. Every single thing that we need rises on that current from our connection to the all. The system adequately supports every tree, every individual tree, impersonally. The root does not pick which tree gets the most blessing. It gives to all. The tree never worries that the tree next to it might get a little bit more. It might be receiving more of its share of nutrients or sunshine or water. The trees don't worry about that. Each tree trusts the roots to deliver exactly what it's needing. So I think our invitation is to be like an aspen tree and know deeply that in the truth of God, we are always supported. We are always connected to Source. There's no way it could be otherwise. And just like the aspen tree, the trunk of our expression grows taller and stronger through the years. Every aspen tree has white bark. I'm sure most of you have seen aspen. Aspen tree has white bark, and it has spots and lines in the bark. And they're like fingerprints. No aspen tree is like another aspen tree because the bark represents its life. You know, if they're growing in places where human beings visit where there aren't park rangers to protect them, the aspen trees will get carved. There will be lots of, you know, I love you forever, JL plus MT forever, whatever. It will be carved because the bark blackens with the scar of that. And so each aspen tree kind of represents the life that it's had. And there's so many professions of love that you can see on the trees when you see them. There are aspen trees up around my family's cabin down in southern Colorado as well. And when Kelsey was a little girl, my daughter, we wrote her name and the date on a tree. And we've never gone back to see it. I think I need to go back and see that. But at any rate, most of the aspen trees kind of grow tall and straight, but some of them kind of take a bend. Like if something like damaged them or whatever, they'll bend, and they're very unique. They're very unique. But I think we are called to be like an aspen tree and know deeply that our individuality is perfect for us. We are perfect just the way we are, and that when something comes along and cuts us, it just makes us more interesting. It just makes us more unique. And I think that's spiritual truth is too. But I also want us to consider the cycle that an aspen tree goes through in its life. You know, in the spring, as we saw in the pictures, in the spring, the branches just become alive with little bright green leaves, and they're beautiful as the wind blows them, and they do shimmer. If you see them like that, they shimmer just happily all summer long, right, in full expression. But in the fall, those green leaves turn the brightest yellow, brightest gold. And a stand of them can become this magnificent grand display of nature at its best. So photographers are thick at maroon bells in the autumn as they try to capture this particular glorious image while it lasts, because the aspen trees are just like everything else. They live cyclically, and the leaves of their creation are released at just the right moment. At just the right moment, that leaf will fall and go, and they will go dormant in the winter, like we all have cycles in our lives like that. So may we be like an aspen tree and just relax. Relax into the natural rhythm of creation, gorgeous full expression, releasing form, and then going into dormancy. Never doubting never doubting that the source within us will always provide what is needed in any given moment in that cycle. And there's one more fascinating point about aspens that I want to point out. When we were at Maroon Bells a few years ago, we had to ride this little bus because they don't let cars get close to this. They have these like little natural gas buses that you get on and they take you in, and then you have to get on the shuttle to go back out. But the parking is like miles away. And we kind of go on this bus into the heart of this beautiful setting. But I think they don't let cars in to kind of protect the natural world from the carbon monoxide as much as they can. But anyway, while we were on the bus, the driver started talking and answering questions. It was time to talk with the bus driver. And we had lots of questions. And one question that came up was about forest fires, because there was evidence that there had been a fire in one of the places that we were driving through. And we were all like, oh, that's horrible that there was a fire. You know, we can't protect from fires. And he said that scientists have said that an aspen stand is healthy for about 60 or 70 years, but then it is best for it to be regenerated by a forest fire or a planned cutting. So natural fires, they prefer that natural fires take care of that because that is a part of the natural cycle. And here's the cool thing. A fire intense enough to kill an aspen stand will stimulate abundant new growth. The Forest Service said that as many as 50,000 to 100,000 tiny aspen can grow and can sprout and grow on a single acre after a fire. A single acre, that's not very big. So aspens are truly representative of the spiritual truth of eternal life, because while the individual expression of a single tree seems and appears to end, it really only falls aside after it's had its full expression and a new life comes forth from the source, because the source is never destroyed. That's beneath the ground. I think that's so cool. But the main difference between you and me and an aspen tree is we have free will. We have free will. While the aspen cannot cut itself off from source, and we truly can't either, but our expression is impacted by our beliefs about our source. We may not physically die when we deny our connection to God, or something bigger, whatever you want to call that. But we all know what happens when we go searching outside ourselves for the things that we need. See, we reach for many, many things before we realize that the ever-present root system of spirit is the real source of our love and our joy and our peace and our harmony. We reach for alcohol, we reach for drugs, we reach for food, we reach for other people, we reach for fun, we reach for activities, for whatever we can find to reassure us that we are okay. We die on a deeper internal level when we forget that there is a community underneath the surface, always supporting us and providing for us. We wither when we think that if it rains on someone else, we are not receiving enough, forgetting that the good of one is actually the good of us all. When we forget our connectedness, we poison our neighbors with judgment and anger, not remembering that whatever they endure falls on us, falls on the ground around us to be reabsorbed into our very own existence. When we doubt ourselves and we hide without growing, we block the sun rays of love with our self-doubt and our insistence upon separateness. So here we come together. Here we come together to remember spiritual truth. There is only one presence, one power, one love, manifesting as all of creation. Separation is a state of mind, but it is not the truth. It's not the truth. And remembering this is where the healing begins. Ernest Holmes says this: we believe in God, the living Spirit Almighty, one indestructible, absolute, and self-existent cause, This one manifests itself in and through all creation, but it is not absorbed by its creation. Think about that for a second. Take a deep breath. I believe the aspen trees illustrate this point, but I believe that all of nature can help us remember this truth. Within the one, there's always going to be multiplicity or diversity of form, but everything is interconnected. It's just simply the truth. It's easy to pull away. It's easy to pull away, to disconnect and forget our connection to the all. We do this through allowing ourselves to be constantly busy, to feel there's not enough time, there's not enough energy, there's not enough money, there's not enough resources. But a powerful spiritual practice is to intentionally stop and remember. Stop and remember that you are always, always connected to Source. So I'm going to encourage you to take some time this week to reconnect with nature and to reconnect with the other, with the divine that shows up in a form that seems to be different than you, but it's not. It's a part of you. And when we do this, we begin to discover the truth, the unity, the wholeness of all there is. So how do you do that, right? So here are some suggestions for this week. To be mindfully aware of the spiritual truth of connectedness. 2 are about getting out into nature, and 2 are about having food. So it can't be bad, right? Okay. So number 1, I invite you to take a 10-minute walk, even if it's on a city street. You know, Lori's reading pointed out that even on the side of a highway, you can find a little wildflower, right? As you walk, I want you to notice where nature shows up. It could be a blade of grass or a little flower poking through a crack in the sidewalk or the road. It could be a bird in a tree, or clouds hanging heavy in the sky, or it could be just light filtering through the trees, illuminating and shading the leaves in multiple shades of green and gold like an aspen tree. But as you notice any detail, become aware of the interconnectedness of that one detail to everything else around it. John Muir, the great naturalist of Muir Woods, wrote it this way: when one tugs at a single thing in nature, he finds it attached to the rest of the world. You cannot pull anything from nature and not realize it's connected to everything else. So that's your one assignment, is take that 10-minute walk. The second assignment, this should be easy. I invite you to mindfully take time to share a meal with someone, with another person. No distractions. Put your phone down, right? Have this meal. And as you eat this meal together, listen carefully for the evidence of how you are connected to this person. How are their emotions like yours? How are they having an experience that you've already had earlier in your life, or maybe you know you're about to have? Listen for that connectedness. How are they moving through their situation in a way that seems oddly familiar to you? Just like feel the impact of that connection on your very being, and see if you can recognize the oneness that is present between you underneath the surface as you see their face as the face of God. So a meal with someone sounds like a pretty good assignment. The third one is, I want you to pick one of these nights this week and take a walk, the clearest night. Look on your phone, see what's going to be a clear night, and go for another walk. Look up at the darkness and behold the stars, but also look at the space in between. Feel the wind and listen to the sounds all around you. The immensity of this as a mindful experience is so beautiful. Everything you feel in that moment is interconnected. There is no space without the energy of God. The energy of God is between every star, between you and the star, between you and the moon. It's all connected. You're an integral part of the picture of that moment, of that experience. You're a part of that. You're connected to all of it. Be mindful of that. And the fourth assignment, lastly, I ask you to take time during a different meal, not the one you're having with that person, because you can't do 2 things at once, I know it. And eat your lasagna. You can't do 2 things. But I want you to contemplate during a meal, what was needed to create the food before you. The grains that make up the bread, if you're eating bread. But think about the wheat, the sunshine, the earth, the seed, the farmer, the picker, the processor, the trucker, the grocer, and everything in between that it takes to get that meal to you. And as you partake of the food, you're taking in and transforming the energy that went into it and taking it into you. And then whatever you do with your expression, you're taking that energy that you've taken in and you're putting it back out into the world. The energy that becomes your energy, that supports your very life, supports other people too. It's all connected. Never forget the truth of the Aspen Grove. You are connected to the spiritual universe. You're connected to Source. Do something powerful to show your appreciation for the universal love that shows up as Mother Earth. Take a moment to consider how you could more fully appreciate the interconnectedness of this world and your place in it, and make a difference in preserving nature as a spiritual living system. And I'll close with this final quote from Holmes. Learn then how to appreciate nature and nature's God. Spend much time in the outer doors. Look up at the stars. Let them be your companions. Tread the pathless ways of the trees and the giant forests, and see God in everything that you look upon, the God of everywhere. So may we all open to a greater awareness of the wholeness, the interdependence of all life, and in doing so become an integral part of the healing, the revelation of a world that works for everyone. And so it is.